Today, we're diving straight into how the modern map of Europe was actually drawn, focusing specifically on the creation of Italy and Germany. We'll be looking directly at historical evidence to really understand how these massive, game-changing shifts occurred.
So, what if I told you that just over 150 years ago, the Germany and Italy we know today were completely non-existent as unified nations? I know, it sounds kind of impossible, right? We tend to think of these countries as eternal pillars of European culture and geography. But historically speaking, they're actually remarkably recent inventions.
Here's our agenda for today. A map without nations. Germany, united by force. Italy, the fragmented puzzle. Two paths to unity. And finally, the engineered nation-state. Let's dive right in. Part 1. A map without nations. The fragmented reality of mid-19th century Europe. We're going to begin by shattering a pretty common assumption about the eternal nature of these famous European countries. You know, it's honestly hard to picture a world without these cultural heavyweights. But if you were to look at a map of Central and Southern Europe before 1871, well, it would probably give you a huge headache. There were absolutely no nation-states as we know them today in these regions. Instead of unified nations with a shared collective identity, these regions were divided into countless autonomous territories. People in these areas often spoke entirely different languages and were ruled by diverse, autocratic monarchs. Take the German-speaking lands, for instance. They were a messy confederation of 39 separate states. Imagine being a merchant traveling from Hamburg to Nuremberg. You'd have to pass through 11 different customs barriers. Each one had its own currency, its own unique systems of weights and measures. Actually, get this, the length of a piece of cloth literally changed depending on which city you were standing in. Total chaos. Section 2. Germany, united by force. Blood, iron, and the Prussian army. So, how on earth do you take 39 independent, squabbling states and forge them into a single empire? Let's take a look at our first architect of unity, Prussia. The dynamic in Germany at the time was intense. You have Otto von Bismarck, the chief minister of Prussia, essentially cracking a whip over the elected deputies of parliament. After middle-class liberals completely failed to democratically unite Germany back in 1848, Bismarck stepped in and took control, and he did not want a democracy. Instead, he used the incredibly powerful Prussian army and a conservative bureaucracy to force unification from the top down, actively bypassing the democratic process to make sure Prussia came out on top. So here is the absolutely crucial takeaway. German unity wasn't voted on by the people. No way. It was won through state-sponsored violence. Over just 7 short years, Bismarck engineered 3 highly calculated wars against Denmark, Austria, and France. And with every single victory, Prussian power expanded. This whole aggressive campaign culminated on a freezing January morning in 1871 in the unheated Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, where the Prussian king, William I, was proclaimed the new German emperor. Germany was unified, for sure, but it was forged entirely through military might. Section 3. Italy, the fragmented puzzle. Secret societies, diplomacy, and armed volunteers. Now let's contrast Prussia's brute military dominance with Italy's deeply fragmented, multi-pronged struggle for independence. The transformation of Italy is like piecing together a massive puzzle. Back in 1858, Italy was divided up into 7 distinct states. The north was controlled by the Austrian Habsburgs, the center was ruled by the Pope, and the south belonged to the Bourbon kings of Spain. Only one single state, Sardinia-Piedmont, was actually ruled by an Italian princely house. Getting from that fractured reality to the unified nation we recognize today was incredibly complex. And unlike Germany's one-man show under Bismarck, Italy required a whole diverse cast of characters. First up, you had Giuseppe Mazzini. He was this visionary who believed God intended nations to be the natural units of mankind. And he formed the underground secret society Young Italy to spread this radical idea. Then you had Chief Minister Cavour. He wasn't a Democrat or revolutionary at all. He was a brilliant French-speaking elite who engineered a crucial tactical alliance with France just to defeat the Austrians in the north. And finally, Giuseppe Garibaldi. In 1860, Garibaldi led an army of 30,000 armed volunteers, famously known as the Red Shirts, marching into southern Italy. He won massive support from local peasants and literally drove out the Spanish rulers. Section 4. 2 paths to unity. Contrasting the German and Italian playbooks. It is just so fascinating to look at how these simultaneous unifications utilized completely different strategies to redraw the map of Europe.
Think about it like this. Germany was fundamentally an authoritarian project. It was driven by conservative Prussian military might, rigid state bureaucracy, and modernization from the top down. Italy, on the other hand, relied on a messy but highly effective hybrid approach. It mixed Mazzini's radical underground ideology, Cavour's high society diplomacy, and Garibaldi's massive grassroots armed uprisings. Yet, despite having completely opposite playbooks, both regions successfully declared themselves unified nation-states in the exact same timeframe, culminating right around 1871.
Which brings us to Section 5, the engineered nation-state, the reality of a newly unified populace. Now, both of these nations successfully achieved unity on paper, but the reality on the ground, well, that was far more complicated than simply drawing a new, larger border on a map.
Because of massive regional variations and incredibly high illiteracy rates, the everyday reality of a unified nation was basically non-existent for the common person. In fact, many of the very peasants in southern Italy who had actually joined Garibaldi's red shirts to fight for unification had never even heard the word Italia. They were so disconnected from the liberal nationalist ideology of the elites that they mistakenly believed L'Italia was just the name of their new king's wife. I mean, they fought for a nation they couldn't even conceptualize. So this leaves us with a pretty profound final thought. The modern nation-states of Germany and Italy weren't just born organically out of some ancient shared culture where everyone magically felt a deep inherent connection to one another. Actually, scratch that, they were intentionally engineered. They were crafted through statecraft, diplomacy, secret societies, and the sheer undeniable force of armies. So as we look at the world map today, we really have to ask ourselves, if the lines on the map are just engineered creations from the 19th century, what does belonging to a country truly mean? I hope this explainer has given you a brand new lens through which to view the